Hey guys, so here's your lesson on 5.1 part 2. Sorry I could not be there in person, but hopefully since this is a continuation of our first lesson for this chapter, you're going to feel comfortable with today's lesson. The only difference is, which we talked about yesterday briefly in class, is that our exponents are now going to be fractions, okay? And remember on your calculator, you can hit, you can hit alpha y equals, and then you'll see option number 1 is numerator divided by denominator. And when you press enter, what that's going to do is pop up a little fraction bar so that you can actually add, subtract, multiply fractions pretty easily, in case there's some weird ones, which I think there is. Once we get down to like number 8 and 9, the fractions start to get a little weird. So let's get started. Example number 1, we have s to the 3/4 squared. Whenever you have a power raised to another power, remember you're going to multiply those exponents. So that's going to be s to the 3/4 times 2. And when you multiply that, you can cross simplify. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And that's going to give you s to the 3/2. No negative exponents, none of my denominators are 0, so we are good to go with number 1. Continuing on with number 2, using a different law of exponents, I'm going to start with my coefficients. So I have 169 divided by 13 is 13. And when I have two things with the same base and I am dividing, I'm going to subtract those exponents. So option number 1, you can go to alpha y equals on that calculator. If you don't want to be too reliant on that calculator, you can get your common denominators and do it by hand. I'm going to end up with 15/10 minus 6/10, which is going to give me 9/10. No negative exponents, no zeros in my denominator, so question number 2 is complete. Remember, if at any point throughout this lesson, if you need to pause or maybe go back and rewind to catch something, feel free. Remember, I'll also be able to answer Canvas messages. Well, I'm not that doctor, so if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Question number 3, k to the negative 4 times k times c to the 2/3. Thinking back to the 3 classes, I feel like a lot of you like to distribute that exponent, even though that's technically not what we're doing. So I'm going to do that first. You could simplify the insides first if you wanted to as well. So that's going to be k to the negative 16, k to the 4th, and c to the 8/3. I'm just multiplying those exponents. Two things with the same base and I'm multiplying. I'm going to add the exponents for the k. And then we can't have negative exponents, so what I'm going to do is move that k to the 12th to the bottom and make it positive. So that negative exponent has to change location so that it can be made positive. Example number 4, we have 3 things with the same base. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually simplify the numerator first, and then I'm going to divide. So I'm going to leave that x squared down at the bottom. But what I'm going to do is simplify the 1/3 and the 5/2. Again, you can go back to that calculator, alpha y equals. If that's not your jam and you don't want to be too reliant on that calculator, you can get your common denominators. And that's going to be 2/6, plus 15/6, or x to the 17/6. Now that I have 2 things with the same base and I'm dividing, I can take those exponents, and subtract. So I'm going to get my common denominator. 17/6 minus 12/6 is just 5/6. It comes out positive, so it stays in that numerator. So hopefully things are feeling pretty comfortable and kind of having you go back and remember those law of exponent rules from 5.1. We're going to get into a little bit more complicated problems. In number 5, you'll notice that we have two things with the same base, and we are dividing. So when we do that, we write the base first, and we subtract those exponents. And what a lot of you might forget is, remember, when you're subtracting, you have to subtract both the x and the negative 1. So I'm going to end up with 4 to the x plus 1 minus x plus 1. So 4x minus x cancels, and then 1 plus 1 is 2. And we all know, hopefully, that 4 squared is 16. So that's the halfway point. We've got 5 more to get through, and then you can have some time to start your homework. So question number 6. I feel like a lot of you are going to want to start by distributing that negative 1 exponent. However, we can't do that because I have a polynomial inside. I have an addition sign in between them. I'm not allowed to distribute. So what I need to do first is I'm going to rewrite those numerical values within that parenthesis. So 2 to the negative 1, make the 2 exponent have a positive and move it to the bottom. Same thing with the 2 to the negative 2, move it to the bottom, make it positive. And then all of that is still raised to the negative 1. Now 1/2 plus, and then 1 over 2 squared, that's just 1/4. 2 squared is 4. So I'm going to simplify inside that parenthesis. I can go to my calculator, or I can get a common denominator pretty quickly. 2/4 plus 1/4 is 3/4. And then that gets raised to the negative 1. That negative 1 is going to tell me to basically relocate that 3 and that 4. So if you wanted to take it in an extra step, you would distribute that negative 1 because there's no longer addition or subtraction signs. And then you can flip it in that step. Some of you could probably skip that 3 to the negative 1 divided by 4 to the negative 1. So with that same mentality, we're going to try one like number 7. And if you want to try it before I go over it, feel free to stop and fast forward and see if our answers match. If not, we're going to start. We cannot distribute that 1/2 because I have that subtraction sign. So I'm going to do the same thing I did in question 6. I'm going to rewrite my exponents to be positive, simplify the inside of that parenthesis, and then deal with that 1/2. So when I do that, I end up with 1 over 64 and 1 over 100. So my common denominator is actually going to be 6,400. Some of you might be going to the calculator on this one. If not, I'm getting common denominators. So I have 100 over 6,400 minus 64 over 6,400. And I end up with 36 over 6,400. Some of you might go to your calculator and type that in, 36 over 6,400 to the 1/2. Your calculator will tell you 3/4. For those of you that are curious, a little reminder from last year, I think the top number stays your power. The denominator in an exponent becomes your root. So if you did not want to use a calculator, that is basically the same thing as 36 over 64 to the first power, and then square rooted. So the square root of 36 is 6. The square root of 6,400 is 80. And then you would simplify to get the same thing. Most of you will probably use the calculator and then go straight to the 3 over 40. So now we're back to the letters with multiplication between them, so I can go back to distributing that exponent. So for number 8, there's a couple different ways you can start. You can start by distributing and then simplifying, or you can simplify within the parenthesis and then distribute. Okay. I'm actually going to choose to simplify within the parenthesis first. You will get the same answer if you distribute that exponent of an 8 first. Again, same, you'll get the same answer. So I'm going to combine my n's. So I have n to the first times n to the first, and then a 3/5. And then for my h's, I have a 2/3 and a 6. And then all of that is still raised to the 8th. So 1 plus 1 is 2, and then 2 and 3/5, that's 10, so that's 13/5. H to the 2/3 plus 6, that's 6 and 2/3. I can make that mixed number an improper fraction. 18 plus 2 is 20. And then don't forget, all of that is still raised to the 8th. So all of that work was just to simplify what was in those parentheses. Then I can give each of those variables, raise it to the 8th power. 13 times 8 is actually 104 from my calculator. Because remember, power to a power we multiply. And 20 times 8 is 160. Neither one of those fractions and those exponents can be simplified, so that's as far as you can go. So in the set we've done so far, I would say that probably 5 through 8 is probably your more complicated chunk. So I'm hoping that as we finish 9 and 10, you'll have that confidence to go and start that 5-point B homework, emailing me or Canvas messaging me if you have any questions. So in number 9, I simplified within the parenthesis for number 8, so I'm actually going to distribute the square first for number 9. So when I do that, remember it goes to everything, all 4 parts, the 2 y's and the 2 n's. So power to a power you multiply. 5/4 times 2 is 10/4, or 5/2. N to the 6th squared, power to a power you multiply. Power to a power you multiply, power to a power you multiply. And then I can simplify. 5/2 minus 2/2 is 3/2. N to the 12th divided by n squared is n to the 10th, all in the numerator. And then last one, number 10, 25b to the 1/2 times b to the negative 1/2. Two things with the same base, I'm going to add those exponents. And when I add those exponents, 1/2 plus a negative 1/2 gives me 0. B to the 0 power is 1, and 25 times 1 is 25. So that is page 18. You're now equipped to do your 5.1b homework. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed, Canvas message me. We can try to figure out a plan of when you can come see me. I'll also make sure I get to school early on Wednesday in case you have any last minute questions on that homework. But that 5.1b homework is due Wednesday morning by 8 a.m. See you guys on Wednesday.